So serious. I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 520 for February 6, 2023. I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for our second rendition of the new show. It's interesting. I, of course, listened back to last week's episode, as I always do.
Yeah.
And we briefly mentioned it, but maybe not enough. I don't know if we emphasized that last week we celebrated this anniversary, this 10-year anniversary thing. It was a little bit of a significant milestone, and we just kind of brushed by it.
InSession Film is a decade old. How about that?
Yeah, so, I thought I'd call it out again here. It was really fun to celebrate that last week. Obviously, last week's show, the first of this new era that we're in, went live the day we turned 10 years old. It was very exciting.
And what happens
what else
when you
is
turn
10 years old? After Earth.
After Earth. Yes. And that's what we're here to review this week, everybody. We're going to do After Earth again, followed by Avatar: The Last
Jaden
Airbender.
Smith deep dive.
Karate Kid? Oh my God. Are you kidding
It's
me?
actually not that bad.
It's not that
Yeah.
bad, actually.
Yeah.
No.
We are not going to be doing that. Instead, we will be talking about M. Night Shyamalan, though. He has a new film out right now, Knock at the Cabin. Brendan and I have a review of that already up that you can go and listen to or watch on YouTube, which is what I recommend. So go and check that out. So to start off the show this week, because his career, obviously a little distinct, there are three acts to his career right now. So we will be talking about the rise, the fall, and then the resurrection of Steven Spielberg Part 2, a.k.a. M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, yes.
That poor
next
man.
Spielberg, the next
poor man.
Hitchcock, the next whatever.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about M. Night Shyamalan, and then we'll close out the show with some Q&A. We try to get some questions from our listeners and viewers out there, and got some fun questions. So we'll end the show there. But let's start things off here with M. Night Shyamalan. I guess before we get to the rise of him and his early films, what are you guys thinking about him on the whole? Where do you sit on M. Night Shyamalan?
Well, I'll say that M. Night Shyamalan is one of the weirder entities, I think, left in Hollywood, because you can't really pinpoint anyone like him, I think. Someone that's had massive highs, extreme lows, and even in his sort of resurrection, as we're calling it, or his second part of his good stretch of his career, there's still divisiveness that is within what is the best films of his and which is not. I remember watching him, like most of us, when I was a kid, and my dad took me to see pretty much all of his films, particularly in the Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs sort of era. And ever since then, they've sort of been kind of like a little bit of like mini events. Whether they're good or bad events is entirely up to you still. And I think that he is still one of the only directors that, when you talk about it, he drives conversation throughout the entirety of when he releases a film, even the trailers, the anticipation for his films. People go and see him. It's number one at the box office. He dethroned Big Jim this weekend.
Go Cam.
Which if somebody was going to do it, it's kind of great that it was M. Night Shyamalan, another sort of very original, kind of insane. I wouldn't call him a genius. I would call him, just a director and a writer who makes choices that some of us call baffling, some of us call brilliant, some of us are still trying to figure out what the hell they mean. Like there's some mixed emotions that come with them, but overall, I you mentioned it, JD, up at the top, that Time magazine article about him being the next Spielberg, and I always felt very bad for M. Night Shyamalan, regardless of how bad his films are and the movies that we hate.
Yeah.
to put a label on somebody like that early in their career after one breakthrough movie is a bit ridiculous. And, without M. Night Shyamalan, I don't think that studios would give sort of the leeway and the love and the credibility or the money to somebody even like a Jordan Peele that we see. And I'm glad that history has sort of allowed us to not do the same damn thing with him. But I still find M. Night fascinating, even though I wasn't like the biggest, spoiler alert, the biggest fan of Knock at the Cabin.
Okay.
Which is why we kicked him off the review.
Exactly. I couldn't be there. I was actually part of the rapture.
He was rooting for the rapper.
Exactly. I was like, come on into the world. Make it feel like you're actually in 2023. But no, in all honesty, I think that, he's a guy that does weird shit, and I'm kind of glad that he does it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether he's a genius filmmaker or not, there's something you have to at least call genius in the way that he's able to always make the movies that he clearly wants to make. And a lot of that is because he self-finances pretty much every one of his movies. So he is literally functioning as not just a writer and director. He is a producer on all of his movies. And in some ways,
marketing director.
Not in title either. He's putting his money down, and he has said that is what reignited his creative fire.
Yeah,
is having skin in the game.
Yeah,
that way.
yeah. Which makes it matter for him, and I think that's maybe why when we'll talk about the resurrection phase, if you want to call it that, but why his movies have become so divided is that he has such free reign now to make the movies that he wants to make, and he's had this career that he's clearly at a point in his life where we talked about this during our review, JD. He has this I don't give a shit attitude right now that I love. It makes the movies wildly ambitious that they often trip on those ambitions. But given the landscape nowadays, I'd rather see those ambitions. I'd rather see a director like this kind of fall on his face at times and take those swings, literally spin the camera around like a toddler with a new toy when he makes a movie like Old, for instance. I mean, there's no way those camera tricks should work.
Did you say Old? Oh my God.
Old is the one that got me. I was like, this guy is one of the most interesting filmmakers working right now. I mean, that movie is like downright experimental. It is
mid-size
crazy.
sedan. Sedan.
And I mean, especially, I actually think Glass is kind of subversive as well. Not
I agree.
entirely successful. I kind of like that movie. My hot take is that I like Glass more than Split. But
I'm with you. I'm actually with you.
I'm
on
not
that.
far off from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't
So
say
my
it's a
hot
great.
take is that I like Split more.
Yeah, I guess so.
How funny.
You're normal, JD.
But
You're
here's the
normal.
thing about-
on the
here's-
InSession Film
I don't know.
Podcast, the hot take is the consensus.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's like no matter how good or bad these movies are, even whether I like them or not, a lot of them I'm still thinking about, even after like a couple years have gone by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like M. Night the same as you're talking about there, Brennan. He's always provoking fascinating conversation. And as we talked about in our review of Knock at the Cabin, like my response to that is the same as Jay just did talking about Old.
Yeah.
I love the camera work. I love the editing of Knock at the Cabin. And it's his most thematically provocative in a long, long, long time. And I love that he's willing to kind of provoke people in a certain way, especially given how our country in so many ways is defined by religious fanaticism, and he very much puts a mirror up to that in this incredible way that I don't know if I anticipated. And then of course there's the twist that there isn't a twist, but there actually is a twist. That is so quintessentially M. Night. Yeah. So Knock at the Cabin, I think, is just an incredible progression of where he's been over the last 10 years.
It does continue to carry this almost deconstructionist mentality, just in a maybe more topical way than maybe something like, let's say, Glass, which was more geared towards the landscape of superhero movies, I think is really more what it was targeting. So there was more of a meta or artistic commentary there, whereas something like Knock at the Cabin is maybe taking itself a little bit more seriously. But he's always trying to deconstruct something that gets people to have a debate and a dialogue.
I just like the fact that, you mentioned all those themes, but then he's just like, I'm a guy who's got a concept and I'm going to see how far I can take this concept. Like Old is a concept and it's
a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah. And what I love
those
about
are the movies that he makes now. He doesn't make, and his first few movies are so, well, after, he made Praying with Anger and Wide Awake, whatever. Yeah. His career started at The Sixth Sense. His first few movies from Sixth Sense on, they're very austere and they're kind of striving for something a little more prestigious than what he's doing now. He's making Twilight Zone episodes now. He's making 90, 100-minute long Twilight episodes where he takes a really high concept and he says, how far can I take this? And he's getting pulpier and schlockier. And I have not seen Knock at the Cabin, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah,
it seems like that one is a little more.
It feels more like a movie when compared. I would say the way it flows feels more like a movie, whereas, and it still carries that conceptual nature like you're talking about there, Ryan. But even like a movie like Old, like it does kind of feel like this extended Twilight Zone episode like you're talking about there, Jay. It doesn't always feel like a movie, which is something I kind of admire about it. I think it's interesting the way he constructs these things nowadays.
Yeah, I think like for me, I wasn't that big on Knock at the Cabin. I think that the problem is, I think the source material and everything, it feels like the source material is like material made for M. Night Shyamalan rather than like M. Night Shyamalan making the material. And I felt that, reading up on the other ending, reading up on, a lot of stuff afterwards and everything about it, as I was watching the film, though, I was like feeling as if the gears were turning for something else. And I felt as if like the freedom and the ambition and the wild sort of swings that he was taking with something like Old, which I extremely admire.
It's more restrained. Knock at the Cabin is more restrained by comparison.
Yeah. And for me, I was kind of hoping for that same sort of energy. Cause like Jay mentioned, like even Glass, a movie I'm not like, I don't think Glass is a masterpiece or anything like that, but it's so interesting what he's trying to say, especially off the high of that teaser at the end of Split. To go and do a movie like that to cap off this trilogy is kind of bold, is very bold for you to do. And then to do Old, which, that's the other funny thing about M. Night Shyamalan is anytime you watch a trailer in theaters now, people just are like ready to write him off. It's kind of fascinating to watch a trailer with an audience.
Not anymore.
I mean, there was a point where he was the name was the butt of a joke.
You know what the one for me it was that movie Devil.
Devil?
Where it's like, I don't know, is it like Satan is an elevator?
Satan in an elevator.
I haven't seen the movie. But I remember in the trailer in the movie theater, it came up from producer M. Night Shyamalan. And
everybody
people laughed. Yeah. I experienced that too.
Laughed.
I know I remember that trailer specifically too, because it was like everyone was kind of like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, a devil in an elevator, we can buy into this. And then it was from producer M. Night Shyamalan, and I remember one lady going, "Oh, come on, not him." And I just remember, I'm like, that's why I always feel like I feel bad because, like, yes, he's made some duds. We're gonna talk about them.
Yeah, there are some duds. The greatest twist of his career is that he has one of the worst 3 movie runs of any director of the modern era. Despicable.
And he might have also one of the great
Last Airbender, After Earth. Woo!
But he also might have one of the best 3-run films of modern eras for directors with Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. So it's weird. Yeah. You kind of just
what a dichotomy.
What a balance this man has.
Did he plan this? Did he plan to have his career be a literal
every action has a reaction?
Exactly.
He wanted his career to have a 3-act structure.
Yeah.
I do want to get to the beginning, but even when we're talking about this phase of his career, I think what's so interesting, Ryan, about what you're saying with his experimental filmmaking and something like Glass and Old, and I do appreciate the ambition of those films, even if I do think he trips over those ambitions. What's fascinating to me about Knock at the Cabin is that he is not trying to regurgitate that. If anything, he's using that experimentation as a device in Knock at the Cabin to subvert expectation, which I think is fascinating because the straightforward storytelling of that film is 1,000% intentional. It is wholly purposeful for what we get at the end of the film and what the film is doing in terms of its ideas on religious fanaticism, and again, pointing a mirror to that. So to have that sort of style in Knock at the Cabin would be a complete disservice, but I do think he makes up for that with these incredible extreme close-ups and the editing, the empathy of the performances. Brendan and I talked about how that's arguably the best performed movie since The Village. So it's interesting how I think he's still tapping into this incredible creative energy, but in a different way that isn't him mimicking something that we've already seen from him the last few years.
Yeah,
so there has been a trajectory that I think is really great.
Yeah, I can see that, JD. I think like when you watch Knock at the Cabin, technically speaking, it's a beautiful looking film. He's got those closest you mentioned. I think Shyamalan, between this and the Village, and even like Shots Out of Sign, his use of the camera within an environment, within like the woods or cornfields or things of this nature. He's really great at building tension within space. And so and I think that there's, Dave Bautista's performance in that film is really, really great, and I hope to see more roles like that for him, more lead roles for him.
Like that.
Yeah, or like I told somebody.
Shout out to Dave Bautista for just showing The Rock how it's done.
Exactly. Move over, John Cena. Batista's right there.
Wait for the comment section.
But no, I think the thing about like Shyamalan, and this last point, and then we can get into the sort of rise and fall here about Knock at the Cabin, is I think that I just think that I appreciate his more originality, and I think that the adaptation of it's kind of something along the lines of when I was watching it, I was trying to figure out, like, did M. Night pick this, or did Universal give him this book and say, we'll let you go off and go wild with Old, but you gotta make this one afterwards. And I don't know when the release of this book came out.
I know the answer to that question.
Do you? Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't think Knock at the Cabin is safe, though, especially given how he's pointing the mirror.
I think
that half the country.
I think if you know the ending of the book,
which I don't, by the way,
it is a safer.
Devastating. It's absolutely devastating.
It's absolutely devastating. It's
devastating that I don't think this climate would want to see nowadays.
But I don't think it's safe. I would not say that safe is a genuine word to use because of what he is commenting on.
It's different.
He's pointing a finger at something
director.
No, he's always got sincerity. I just think that the sincerity in this film isn't 100% there for me, and I think that it was this one for me watching it, and I'm probably the biggest defender of this man here. And I put money down on it probably. But I think that this movie for me was maybe also part of just my expectations coming into it, coming off of Old, something that Old was the kind of ambition that you saw in that first 3 run movie for me. Wow, it's not a perfect film for sure, but it's just like, damn, we don't get to see directors make a lot of this. And it felt like, if I'm calling it safe within the box of, it's based off a novel. It
has a tightness and an efficiency.
Yeah, it's a little bit more tighter and not as loose as I want. That being said, yes, for the story that it's trying to tell, it has to do this kind of structure. It's kind of built off of that. It's, obviously from a book, but it doesn't mean that, like, the next thing that he does, I'm not going to be there opening night like I was for this Giacomo. You know what I mean? So it was really good.
Yeah.
It's a really good experience to go and see. Oh yeah, for sure. I got to see those that fire and that water and everything. I think like that's the other thing too you could really say about M. Night. It's like he gets you to go to the theater. He really makes you have a communal experience, whether you don't like it or not.
He gets you to see his own film instead of Avatar for like the 17th time.
Exactly. Which
although that movie did underperform. Knock at the Cabin underperformed. It didn't do.
Oh, I thought you were saying Avatar underperformed. I was like, whoa, Jim.
Avatar.
That's a little much.
In its 7th week.
Avatar did all right.
Well, this is
7 weeks. Come on, Big Jim. Those are rookie numbers. You got to get them up.
I do wonder. We talked about this, Judy, and we can move on from this now. But I do wonder if Knock at the Cabin would have done better if it didn't have an R rating. There's no reason that movie needed to be rated R. It really isn't.
No.
it really doesn't.
No, Brendan, I'll agree with you. Some movies don't need to be R, like Knock at the Cabin. Some movies do need to be R, like Macon.
Like Old.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Actually,
Old needed to be rated R.
Yeah.
Old, yeah, that whole calcium sequence in Old is way more viscerally frightening than anything in Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say on Knock at the Cabin, then we can get to the early years of M. Night. And
Yeah.
it circles back to something I think you said, Jay, at the award show, if I'm not mistaken. Something about what we want out of these movies, right? And you guys have talked about, certain technical components, cinematography being one of them. And cinematography is certainly something that matters to me. I think the close-ups of Knock at the Cabin are very important to the character and the dynamic of that film. But at the end of the day, perhaps it is the bold audaciousness of its themes and how it subverts religious fanaticism that I think is really fascinating. To me, that is the driving force of that film, and why having a gay couple at the center of it is vital for that film working as potently as it does. So perhaps it just kind of comes down to things like that, what you're wanting out of it, and you saw it differently than I did. And but that's what makes M. Night interesting. Circling back to the top of this,
he doesn't conform.
Fosters conversation. So
Yeah.
all right, let's talk about the beginning of his career. Obviously, really kicking off with The Sixth Sense, and then into Unbreakable and Signs. A hell of a 3-film run.
Yeah.
What do we think about these films?
Let me just hop in here. I watched Wide Awake for this podcast.
Oh god, here it is.
Look at the completist coming in through.
That movie has a twist ending. Believe it or not,
does have a
it
twist
has
ending.
a twist ending.
Of course it does.
Sucks. The whole movie stinks on ice. There's a part, Rosie O'Donnell plays a nun, and at one point in the film they're in class and she's like trying to describe the Bible in terms of baseball, and she's like, all right, everybody, tomorrow make sure that you tell me which Bible character would bat cleanup for your team. And I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
That's that stilted M. Night dialogue, I guess. But
I've always loved the idea of that movie and actually trying to portray religiosity in a kids' film like that.
It's Signs. It's Signs.
Yeah.
It's Signs before Signs.
Yeah, I like the idea of those themes existing in a kids' film. Really, if I have any defense for the movie, I've told you guys this already through a text chain, but I have some nostalgic ties to it because one of the nuns who pulls the young girl back in one scene was my 4th grade teacher. So
that's right.
I remember you saying
we got to
that,
get into the Philly of it all.
Yeah. I'm a local boy here.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't live too far from M. Night's house, honestly. But yeah,
why didn't you bring him onto the show? Go get him.
I'm
Take
not
a
that
break,
tight
go
with
get
him.
him. Come
I'm
back.
not that tight with him, unfortunately. I stalked him too much. He got a little creeped out. But yeah, my 4th grade teacher actually, she doesn't speak in that movie. She's just an extra, but it's that one moment when I guess the love interest of sorts to the main character, she says to him, like, have you found what you're looking for? You will. But then she's pulled back and the nun kind of whispers something in her ear. Yeah, that was my 4th grade teacher. Jean Orlando, her name was.
There you go.
Wow.
Fun little cameo.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
Anyway, these 3 good movies.
Good
Yes.
movies.
Yes.
Yes.
They are my top 3.
I would say everybody's favorite is in this crop.
Yes.
I think so.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Signs is a masterpiece. We've talked about it.
Signs
Let's
is
go
my
around the
favorite.
horn. Let's go around the horn. All right, Signs, Ryan.
Science. Yeah.
Signs.
Mine is Unbreakable. So
Okay.
Also very good. Probably
Yeah.
my number 2.
I'll have the hot take
Probably
here.
me.
And that really just comes down to, like, I mean, JD, it's what you're talking about with what do we want from movies? What do we, what are our favorite things? What do we value in movies? Unbreakable is one of the most incredible looking movies I've ever seen. It looks so great.
And at times, like we talked about this, Jay, when we reviewed that back to back with The Sixth Sense in preparation for, I think, Glass on an extra film episode some years ago, and we talked about the blocking of Unbreakable and the cinematography there. It almost sometimes looks like the blocking of a comic book without being so deliberate about it. It's really intricate and really interesting. Yeah.
And, I mean, I think a lot of like the moody, dark, superhero movies of our time sort of like has very much the influences of something like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, but definitely has a lot of the existentialism from this movie. I mean, this is such a influential film that people don't, I think, talk about enough. And it also has to follow the Sixth Sense, which was a global phenomenon. Like that's
Crazy.
that's the thing
that's
about
a good point. Yeah,
that movie is, Jay and I, we also on that same episode, I believe that you and Brendan talked about Unbreakable. We talked about the Sixth Sense, and I remember that rewatching the movie, and the twist and everything. You know what I mean? And we all know the twist because it's been just like meme and joked.
It's
upon
engraved
for
in
years.
pop culture.
It is
time.
It is the Luke, I am your father of our generation, sort of speak.
sure.
Kind of, yeah.
And even a Lonely Island song has Bruce Willis dead at the end of Sixth Sense, and I'm not going to finish the rest of the lyric. But I think that what's so great about that movie is not even the main crux of it with Bruce Willis. It's like the stuff with Haley Joel Osment. You kind of forget how great he was in that film, but then Toni Collette, those scenes where they're just together, especially in the kitchen and then in the car, they're so well blocked that and what's crazy about the film is that when you go back and rewatch it, the clues are all there. You can kind of look for that, but it really is just this beautiful, heartbreaking story about a mother and a son.
It's so
at the
earnest.
core of it. Yeah, it's very earnest.
It's a ghost story, but it's not really a horror movie. I mean, it was marketed as such, and I think, certainly the actual twist of the movie took so many people by surprise because they had no idea something like that was going to happen. But I think the bigger thing that made people realize how great it was that level of devastation that it carried. Like, and it actually earns that. It's a beautiful movie, and I think that's what people kept responding to. So to have that kind of ending, it didn't just surprise people. You actually felt bad for Bruce Willis in it. And
the surprise means nothing if you don't feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why you're able to
cares?
rewatch the movie over and over again, despite knowing the twist. It works as a great dramatic exercise.
Absolutely, yeah.
More than kind of the twist guy. M. Night for me, especially now, I watched or for the first time or rewatched a bunch of his movies this week. More than the twist guy, he's this really tender kind of sincere filmmaker. I mean, he's so into family and spirituality for sure, especially in this this Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs, The Village. Spirituality is just oozing out of every pore of those movies.
I mean, Jay, he reminds me a lot of when we were watching the Wachowskis, sort of directors of that era, having sentimentality, this earnestness.
I don't know that anybody's as sentimental as the Wachowskis.
They are very romantic. Theirs is more, I think, romantic.
Yeah.
And everything. And M. Night's is more, I think, at times philosophical and religious. And I think but I think both of them have the soft hand that what makes their films, I think, really age well. Even their bad movies, there is stuff you can find in the garbage of some of these films that you're like, I don't know if that's
boring garbage for one
that's
thing.
never like
boring.
even like
M. Night's got some boring ones.
He's got some boring ones, but there's still stuff in there that you're like, okay, well, at least that was good, or like I get where he was going. Like I feel like with his mistakes, when we get to those are like, I weirdly understand where the man's coming from. And in these films, like you're talking about like Bruce Willis and Mel Gibson, these ginormous action stars giving completely vulnerable performances in Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Science. Like not many directors were able to do that in their careers, to get these guys to do stuff like that. And I find that to be also very fascinating too. It's like, he's the guy that throws himself in there, kind of like Tarantino into his films and always in an eye-rolly thing or whatever. But like, he's a really good character actor director. And he really works a lot with these guys, like even Joaquin Phoenix. He worked with him on Science in The Village, and he's able to do things with these actors that you wouldn't expect from him, like that. I think we talk about Collette and we talk about Haley Joel Osment, but Willis in Sixth Sense is, like you said, you got to buy into that.
And say what you will about Mel Gibson, the man, but I think his best performance is Signs. I think
agree.
As an actor, I think that is his best performance.
Mel Gibson he's
so good.
He's one of my faves.
He's
just a problematic fave. I mean,
he is a movie star, and it's just like, God
I
damn
can't
it.
really say it out loud, but he's like one of the best movie stars of all time. He's
a terrible human being.
Terrible person.
Terrible person,
really
but still good at his
man.
job. A presence on screen, nonetheless.
Yeah.
But even with Signs too, there has been this joke that we refer to M. Night Shyamalan sort of carrying. Like his name was kind of the butt of a joke after a little while when he started making these failures that came in this next phase of his career. But there was a point when he was making Signs where he actually had a good hand at tone and humor. Like Signs is actually a very funny movie. And I think part of that is because it sort of predated when he was aware of his own ego, when, all the publications started calling him the next Spielberg or Hitchcock. And he sort of I feel like we can assume he let that go to his head. But Signs...
Yeah, he's admitted it as much. Yeah.
Yeah. Signs is really the first time where I felt like he really tried to imbue one of his movies with very deliberate comedy. And it worked because in that case there was sincerity to it. He wasn't trying to up himself, but then he also has great performances from Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix, who actually have to sell like this awkwardness that actually works in that movie. He was really good at tone management for a while in this early phase.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He was, yeah. Signs has some really stilted dialogue, though. That is one thing I will say.
Well, again, this is where a great performer and a great cast can sometimes hide that from you.
And the camera work in that movie, that one is like on the old level of, he's doing some wild stuff.
I will never forget that theater experience I had seeing Signs with a large group of people. It was almost like, it wasn't a 3D film, obviously, but it was almost like seeing a 3D movie at Disney or something. Like, you remember those like 3D movies like Honey, I Shrunk the Audience or something like that, where you almost feel like there are things that are actually walking around you. It's like really immersive. Sometimes it almost feels like 4D. There were moments like the hand underneath the door, which has no musical cue.
That's the moment with the knife and
the knife. I mean, it's one of the most terrifying things I've ever.
There's
seen
no musical cue to create a jump scare out of that, and yet when I saw that in the theater, everyone screamed, everyone shrieked. My legs actually shot up because I thought I felt something underneath me. Somehow it was just that immersive. He uses trickery in a way that's not conventional.
Well, I think that's the thing about
alien in that movie is like
that's an iconic jump scare.
It's so straightforward, but it's still so scary.
Well, I think what's interesting about these films, but even some of what we've seen from him recently, it's not really just the performances or the camera work. All of that is great, but it's the editing. Signs is arguably the best edited film of his canon. And I think a big part of why that moment you're talking about there, Brennan, is horrifying is the editing of it. Or I think about the pathos of the scene in the basement between, a father and son. All of that is effective because of performance in James Newton Howard, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But also the way he messes with the editing, the way he messes with tension. So like going back to the hand underneath the door sequence, right before that moment happens, there's a small moment of relief when Mel Gibson thinks, screw this, I'm not going to bother with this. So he gets up to leave, but then decides, no, I need to figure out what this is, then goes back to it. So there's almost like this pause, like the newsreel sequence that you were talking about there, Jay. It kind of works because there's actually a joke leading up to that scare. When Joaquin Phoenix says, move children, vamonos, it's really funny. So it creates this sense of relief only to pull the rug from under you more quickly.
Yeah, that moment as well. That's another great example. Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Good movie.
Great one. It's a great one. And let's JD, let's do it. James Newton Howard. I mean, what did I text you guys this weekend?
So good.
I said, hey, I'm doing like a M. Night rewatch. My biggest takeaway so far, holy cow, James Newton Howard is just
so good.
Yeah.
Good man.
He is great. I mean, I feel like I've been arguing this for years, and of course, we ended our Knock at the Cabin review with it as well, and I will continue to do so until it happens. What GoFundMe do we need to start? Whatever we have to do to get those two to work together again.
He didn't do Knock at the Cabin, right?
No,
he did not. No, but what do we need? This is what we
refer
referred to at the end of our review: is what do we need to do to get them
together? Because their work together is phenomenal.
Yeah. It would have helped the movie too if James Howard was doing that score for me. Because
I didn't hate the score for that movie.
That score at the end of Sixth Sense too, when everything is being pulled together. But even too, like the musical cues in Unbreakable, and then used later on.
The score for The Village is like top top
It's
tier.
oh my god.
So
yeah,
The
it's
look
so good.
of the village too.
I mean,
is, like,
yes.
top tiers.
The Village is ridiculous for many reasons. One, I just think that movie is
it's good.
it's
a good
technically just impressive. It's got so many flourishes. I think also too that Jay, you mentioned that with kind of science. Like for me, The Village is like but with The Village walks so then old could run. You know what I mean? And like The Village just has all these decisions that maybe they don't add up for everyone, but damn it, like the movie just when I watched it recently, I was just like, man, I am okay to just. This is where I started the sympathy tour, where I was just like, you know what, I'm okay with this. Like for a guy to do these things, I mean, I'm telling you, those sequences where it's just there's silence, the way he uses. The way we talk about the way he uses music, the way he uses silence in his films are absolutely ridiculous to build tension.
Yeah.
He is a master of tension. And in that movie in particular, and yes, the twist is debatable at best.
How do we feel about it? Where do we stand on
I don't have a problem with it.
I love the twist in the village, but then
Yeah.
again, I think a lot of it comes from
I like the twist as well.
it's not necessarily personal experience, but I can tell he's pulling from his Pennsylvania roots to use as inspiration because it's very much, I grew up in the middle of rural Pennsylvania where there were a lot of, Mennonite communities and things like that. And that's not to say that that's what this movie is specifically depicting, but it's looking at Lancaster County and some of those people that choose to live in isolation as kind of an inspirational point. So seeing the way he's using rural Pennsylvania as kind of a character in that movie was something I was able to relate to in a way. And I could see why if you don't have that upbringing. I mean, I was late to school many times because I got stuck behind a horse and buggy. I mean, that's how it was. So, but if you don't have that experience, I can see why you might find it more frustrating, I guess.
I find the ending to be kind of tragic, to be honest
Well,
with you.
It's very tragic.
I agree.
And I like it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
the whole point of that is not that like, look where we are. We're actually. I don't know. We can talk about it, right? It's all
yeah, we can talk about it. It's old enough now.
It's all-
The point of it is not, whoa, we've been in modern day the whole time. The point of it is, hey, guess what? This isn't like how people live. People are living this way because they don't want people to feel as terrible as they did when their kids died.
Yeah.
That's the point of the twist.
It's
And
a devastating movie, and
heartbreaking.
the fact that your main characters, who are essentially adults, they're young adults in a way, they have this innocence and this naivete around them. Yet Joaquin Phoenix and Bryce Dallas Howard specifically, which makes their romance really beautiful. It's almost like a coming of age tale of sorts. It weirdly reminds me more of like a Nathaniel Hawthorne story, like The Scarlet Letter or something, as opposed to a horror movie that it was marketed as. And I think if you look at it more in those ways, there's a lot of beauty in The Village. I think it is a beautiful movie.
That movie is the one that feels like a prestige movie.
Yeah.
That one, you can kind of feel it like, I'm going to try to blend my sensibilities with kind of Oscar ambition.
Yeah, he was trying, I guess, for that. Honestly, I would probably put The Village as my favorite M. Night film if it weren't for Adrian Brody's performance.
That is a wild swing.
He should have had his Oscar taken away because of that performance. I think it is that bad.
What a cast that movie has too.
It will,
what
yeah.
a deep roster. My God.
I mean, it was it was insane. I mean, like, I think the other thing about The Village too, and I know that it's been reassessed, especially by people and with disabilities throughout the many couple of years that it's since its release, and I think that what makes it even more tragic, and why it is an absolute damnation on the leaders in the film, is their abusive nature towards everyone, but specifically, like the Adrian Brody character, like the Dallas Bryce Howard character, these people that are vulnerable, that are quite innocent in all this, and yet are caught up within these, social, sort of almost even political circumstances, and that it really feels very much as if they are specifically targeted almost at a certain point by the people that are in charge. And I think that that's a really interesting way of doing it. Yeah. It's, I think, a movie that's aged better for me, because I don't think that at the time it came out, it really was, we were fully there or ready for it. and now
was
I
ahead
think
of the curve. Yeah.
I
Much
think
like
it's
Unbreakable was ahead of the curve.
exactly. I think right now it's kind of perfect for our more cynical sort of times. And but that's to say is that, like, I mean, there's the sequence in the damn woods where I remember watching that, and I took my stepmom at the time with us, and she just had her hands like covered up. You was watching it through her fingers because she was so terrified. And the audience, yes, it sort of teetered on the while we were all walking out of the theater at the time, but like literally in that moment, it was so riveting to watch people just like collectively jump. Like we see those test audiences now, you know, for like the next Paranormal Activity or whatever.
Yeah.
It had nothing on this movie for me. Like this movie, like everybody was crapping bricks at the time. It was
you
insane.
talk about this movie as some sort of unified experience. I remember this being the one where people were like, "Is this?" No,
Jay, I'm talking about within the horror of those bits, and then by the end is when
as
people
a whole,
were walking out going like,
"This is the start of the fall. This is the start of the fall for sure." And it's certainly the one that has become reassessed more with time, as you're talking about there, Ryan. And I think another part of that too is the stacked cast that you mentioned, Jay. And honestly, if someone were to make the argument that the best single performance in a Shyamalan film is Bryce Dallas Howard in this movie, I don't know if I would push back too much on that. I mean, I think the argument can be made for many examples within his filmography, but she is amazing in this movie.
I mean, Brendan, I believe you mean Lady in the Water, not.
I don't like that movie that much, but I don't think she's the problem in that movie.
Which we can talk about here in a second.
I kind of like it.
I remember you said that. Yeah, I hated it when I first saw it, but I gave it a revisit for this specific episode. I liked it more. I'm still not in love with it. I don't care for it overall, but there are things about it I appreciate more now.
We can get to that here in a second. I do want to end with this. The Village is a film that I have not seen post being a father. At the time when it was first released, I really liked it for a lot of the reasons you guys are saying with its color palette, its cinematography, the tension that is potently thick, as Ryan is talking about. It has some of the most dread that you could experience at the theater, and I certainly felt that at the time for sure. The ending I was very mixed on. I would be curious to revisit the film, though, similarly to my experience with Interstellar, because Interstellar was a movie that I was mixed on the first time, and then you become a father and you watch it through the lens of being a father. And through most of Interstellar, I was having a profoundly more transcendent experience than I ever did the first time before being a father. And I started to really love the film and see it in new ways, despite its contrivances. But what's interesting about the ending, though...
His name is Man, JD.
His name is Man. Oh, God.
The secret enemy is man itself.
Oh, we're not doing this.
Look, man with two ends, though. It's not the same man.
You guys have got to stop. That movie's so good. It was so good.
I bring that up to say... The ending, I was curious as to how I would respond to it, because I mean, that was my biggest problem with the film the first time around. And while I was having a much more vigorous experience with it on a rewatch post being a father, the ending only heightened my frustrations all the more. It did not bring me back down to earth, so to speak. If anything, I just got angrier and angrier, and now it's an ending that I loathe.
That's a damn shame, because it's great. And
so
hug your children out there, folks. That's what we're saying. Hug your children.
And if you chase them down for millennium, don't leave after 30 seconds, please.
I mean,
stay with them for a little bit longer. Who cares what they say? You chase them down for years and years and years and years and decades. Don't leave after 30 seconds.
I honestly wouldn't say that that's the point of the film, but okay.
Side note,
but that's what happens.
Side note,
disingenuous.
Don't want to get us down too much of a rabbit hole here, but I watched AI for the first time as a parent.
Masterpiece, that movie.
Let me
A movie that I need
tell
to
you
rewatch.
what's a good film.
Yes.
Is this why you're
AI,
sick, Jay?
artificial intelligence.
Is this why you're sick? Because you just drained all of your tear ducts and you have no
Dehydrated
moisture
for
Too
left?
much crying.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
He's got AI fever, and not Allen Iverson.
What? I can't believe people thought that ending was like sentimental.
It
is bleak
devastating.
hell. It is
It
like
is
the most,
So dark.
it's like the
very
most
dark.
devastating thing
Yeah.
ever.
I need to rewatch it. I have not seen it in many years, so it is one that I think
one at
when
the
you're
top of the
younger,
list.
that is a movie that
That one on the
doesn't
top of the
particularly
list.
work for you, and I think as you get older, it probably does. So I'm going to give it a rewatch.
But to get back to the point, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts when you revisit the Village. G.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
was
sure
the
if
whole
you'll
point of the Interstellar
Yeah,
story.
but
I
yeah.
just wanted, because I've had this experience already, and it worked and didn't work for me. And with the Village, I'm curious where I land on it because
I think
I can't wait.
I
the
don't know.
Village has more of a through line to those themes on parenthood that you tend to respond to. I think it is a bit tighter in that regard. So I don't see you, if I'm just predicting here, I don't see you hating where the Village goes as you get older. But
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see if I'm wrong in that.
Also, everybody out there, watch Interstellar. It's great. I watched it this past week.
Tars
cried
is
like
awesome.
I
Best
cried like a
movie
baby.
robot.
That is true. Tars
Love
rules.
Tars.
Best movie.
And Tars is in Lady in the Water.
Yeah, he is.
Bill
And
Irwin.
also in
I
the
gotta
Tars
say,
sequel.
can I say something about Bill Irwin? Just real quick.
I
And
love
is
the one.
that
I was thinking about that when I watched Lady in the Water.
every now and then, and Brendan will probably know this. It's like every year they do the Kennedy Center honors, and they always are just like artists and actors and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And for years I've watched that thing, and they've always panned to this like very middle-aged thin-haired white guy that's always clapping and like has the most energy at those things. And then I found out it was Bill Irwin, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand why he gets those tickets, because Tars rules, so he rules, so
Yeah.
he gets a lifetime pass. But like before that movie, I actually knew him more for that than any other film. So
It's pretty insane.
Bill Irwin, if you want to be on the podcast or on the video, just let us know. We'd love to
Gladly
have
welcome
on.
you.
We'd love to have you on.
So
Shoot your shot, folks.
Lady in the
Danny
Water.
guy.
What's interesting to me about this film,
Here we
when you look it up on Wikipedia and you go under critical reaction, the very first sentence is
Fuck this
Lady
movie.
in the Water was panned around the time of its release. Like,
You think?
come on, Wikipedia, you can be a little bit nicer than that. Yeah, 25%. Yeah, we get it. It wasn't great.
Wow.
You can say it a little
Way to
bit.
undersell it. You know?
Wikipedia coming out swinging.
What a bold take, Cotton. Let's see how this one works out. You know what I mean? It's like,
Okay, it's bad. We get it. You can be a little more gentle about it.
I'm going to say this, and I agree with Jay. Lady in the Water's not bad. It's not bad. It's not as bad as 25%. I've seen some movies.
Anyone that says it's bad is not wrong.
They're probably not wrong. There's some. It's preposterous. The movie is
This
preposterous.
movie is kind of indefensible, and I like it.
Yeah, I think that like when I watched it,
One way to put
I've
it.
watched it in recent memory, it's a movie that I'm like, it's just a movie he wanted to make for his kids. I'm not gonna get on the man for making a movie for his kids. Like,
No, see, that's not what I don't think. That's
like
what it is
no,
at all.
like I
These
sat there,
are-
I'm like, I mean, they're dumb decisions throughout this movie, but I also sat there, I'm like, I'm not gonna
this
rip all
movie,
over this man.
These are the dying breaths of a man at the edge of creative Armageddon. This is a man bearing his soul to the world.
I actually
Without
think
the self-doubt and just waywardness. It is crazy.
I love how I found like, oh, he's just making a movie for his kids, and like Jay's like,
Oh, I think
it's
more than
over,
that.
reality is dead,
I actually think
jump
Jay,
off a cliff.
Jay, I actually think you made a really good comparison in your Letterboxd review for the film by actually calling it kind of Charlie Kaufman-esque.
A little bit. I think that's the stuff that doesn't really work.
Well, yeah, like the movie is almost trying to be this simultaneous meta commentary on storytelling, while also be this like inspirational tale about storytelling being a source of healing, and it's trying to be both, and it certainly doesn't get there. It's fascinating to see it trip over those ambitions, but my problem with the movie still to this day is that I just find, from a filmmaking standpoint, I just find it kind of unremarkable.
Yeah.
I think it's the
give you
first
that.
time. Yeah, I even James Newton Howard's score I think is merely fine in this one. I think it's
not one of his best.
No, and that's kind of my thing. I think if there were more swings being taken from a directorial standpoint, I would find more to defend. I think the problem is just I find the execution kind of dull, and I hate using that word. I just can't think of any other word to describe it. It feels passionless, despite the narrative itself seeming like something that he wanted to tell. But I didn't feel that in the final product.
Brendan, do you feel like it's sort of like all the creative juice is put to try to make the story work, and then therefore like the creative side on the technicals are lacking?
I think it's like he put maybe more attention in the ideas that he wanted to convey, and not so much about the way of getting those ideas realized.
The execution.
Yeah, like there are moments in the film where I think scenes do a good job emulating that. I love Bob Balaban's death. I love his death.
See, that moment doesn't play for me.
I love it. It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
I love how we're all throwing out things here like, oh, this really actually worked for me. And Jay's like, none of that worked for me, but I love it. You know what I mean?
I'm waiting for Jay to get to the point
that
where
moment that Brendan is talking about, that's the most Kaufman-esque moment for me.
It is.
Also,
it is.
I mean, you think about what he's doing with this movie. He makes himself the savior of humanity.
Hell yeah.
Because of how powerful his writing is.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
He murders a critic in cold blood because
Sounds
that critic
great.
knows nothing about story structure.
This is actually just mind blowing right now.
Yeah.
So,
He got away with this.
Giddy up.
It's just insane.
Giddy up.
Insane.
Like,
I wonder why it was panned.
I wonder, yeah.
Critics felt
Richard
targeted
Roper
for
said,
once.
why did I watch this? You know what I mean? Like,
But even so, like there are moments in the film that are genuinely beautiful and sincere. Like
Yes.
the healing scene where Paul Giamatti's character of Cleveland realizes he's the healer and starts using his kids as inspiration for that healing. It's actually a beautiful scene. Like I feel like
Giamatti's
that's
great.
that maybe a lot of that is because of Paul Giamatti.
Yeah,
From a
Giamatti
performance
just
standpoint.
kind of carries this movie over the top.
He's giving a
at least.
performance that maybe the film doesn't deserve, especially in that scene. But I did find that scene effective in a movie that's mostly not
Also-
effective for me.
There's a character who works out only one side of his body.
You mean like one side of their mind?
Left brain, right brain?
Yeah, left, right.
I don't know. I like it. It's good.
My
It's not good,
brain is
but I like it.
my brain
It's-
is breaking just trying to think about
It's
what
just
that
it's just one that, again, he's making choices, and I kind of just like, you know what? There are far other people in this world that have
he
made
is
choices
making
that I
choices.
despise more, and in that movie, I'm like, sure, M. Night, just go for it. I'm
I
not
think
going
it is
to
a
swing for it,
fascinating-
M. Night, swing for it. You know what I
Fascinating
mean?
movie.
Swing away.
I'd watch that again before I watch a lot of movies. I mean,
Yeah.
that movie.
Okay.
There's a lot.
I'd
to
certainly
unpack
watch it
there.
over The Happening, that's for sure.
Well,
Oh,
okay,
boy.
here we go.
Which we'll get to. I will say this about The Happening. I don't know if I have any sort of itch to revisit that film, but I will listen to the score because, again, James Newton Howard. So there's that. That's the best thing about it.
I do not remember the score because that movie just like
It's so stupid.
broke my brain. I mean, it is.
Oh, yeah. That is very
you talk
fair.
about that like the really unnatural Shyamalan tendencies with the dialogue and the performances in this movie.
I want to give a. I want to.
Zoe
Yeah.
Deschanel
Yeah.
should be put in jail for what she did in this movie.
John Leguizamo too. He's awful. All of them.
Baffling.
The best way I think I've ever heard this movie described, and I can't take credit for it, I forget who it was. It may have been some YouTube critic, maybe like Dan Merle or someone like that, said the way this movie feels, it's like we sent an actual good thriller into outer space. It was intercepted by aliens. They tried to recreate it in their own way and sent it back to us. Like it's so inexplicable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like those AI things that you keep seeing where it's like AI hot chick, but the chick has like 7 fingers and like some of her half her body looks like it's melted or something. It's like
here's-
AI M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Here's the thing, though. Like, the way that we're describing this movie is the movie I wish I revisited. I rewatched The Happening yesterday as we're recording this.
Yeah, this is not one I revisited.
Well, this is one I got.
I
Maybe I was
revisited
just
every night when I think about
maybe I was just in the wrong
the
frame of
decisions I've
mind.
made in my life.
Oh,
Crying
man.
in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it like literally when I'm sitting there and going like, life's very short, and I spent time twice in my life watching The Happening.
It's like the way we
know what I
talk
mean?
about this movie. It's like it sounds like the best so bad it's good kind of movie or something, or even like so bad it's so bad that you just have to watch it. But I don't know. Maybe I was in the wrong frame of mind during my revisit, but I found it boring as hell now. Like
Boring.
I did tell you
that
that
sequence. The suicide sequence is good.
yeah.
There's an effective shot there for sure. Yeah.
I did tell you, Brendan, because you messaged us last night a little behind the scene baseball. Brendan had a good retort to what I was saying. I was like, well, you went to a concert beforehand. You had a good time beforehand. You're like, the activities beforehand should not hinder the film. And I wanted to read you back, but like, yeah, you had a good night and you were like, let's vibe out and have some more fun with this movie. That's not what this movie is. Like, this movie is bad. Like, don't get me wrong. This is one of the most atrocious experiences I've ever had in a theater. I saw this movie in the theater when it came out. I was one of like 10 people at the time. And I swear to God, Eric Anderson over at Awards Watch, he told me this weekend, and I kind of actually have started to believe it, is that at a certain point, Shyamalan was making a horror film. And then he decided halfway through to just start screwing around on Mark Wahlberg and make it into a comedy. Like, that's what the film feels like. And I kind of like it, but it's also too, to tell you the truth, when I've seen movies are very heavy-handed with their messaging about global warming or our political issues, I gotta say, I'd rather watch something as stupid as this than watch like Adam McKay try to tell me how bad I am at this world. And it's I know it's apples and oranges, but like at least there's like this is some weird apples, man, and I'm never going to this orchard again. But at least I was like, it was something there. Yeah.
Brendan kind of said Lady in the Water is unremarkable. The Happening is incompetent.
It's funny. It's like
And guess what? As bad as it is, it's better than his next two movies.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I will agree.
I don't know if I could go that far, but fair enough. I mean, it's futile comparing those three movies.
Do we all agree that these next three are his three worst?
Oh, yeah.
The Happening, Last Airbender, and After Earth?
Yeah.
They're the worst three movies ever made, yes.
I wouldn't go that far.
JD, splice this portion of the podcast out and just have its own separate video on
I
YouTube.
wouldn't go that far.
I have to.
I think that with The Last Airbender, if you guys are ready to move into that monstrosity,
See, this is where I have something to say.
Yeah, I think that The Last Airbender for me, I never watched the television series. And I know that everybody and their mom watched the television series from our age, and I never watched it. So, and I heard it was the worst movie on the planet. I believe the second Transformers movie came out in the same summer, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. And I just remember going into The Last Airbender, and I watched it, and granted, I have not seen it since. So grade me on a curve if you dare, okay? But I just remember thinking, it's fine. Like, it's not great. It's not bad. It's not any better than half the other bad sort of CGI spectacle films that I get to see at this era. There are some cool action bits in there because it's kind of hard, I think, for M. Night to not at least put a couple of interesting sequences in his films.
Not good at action.
The child actors are god awful. Dev Patel, thank God he had a career after this. But I don't think it's the worst thing on the planet. If you're watching it solo, though, as opposed to like in a regular year full of other crap, then yes, it's probably going to stick out. But in the time when I watched it, and I think you have to kind of judge it based off when you watch it, and I haven't seen it since, so clearly it could change. especially, just like Jay when he watched it recently, and you're not watching a lot of bad things. I think that it wasn't that bad for me, but I understand the visceral hate from the fans, because when you have something that's beloved and it's destroyed, whether it was his fault, whether it's the studio, whatever, it's a giant calamity for that.
Can I speak to this film real fast?
Yes, JD.
I'll say one thing: better than Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. I do want to speak to this, and I have a fun, maybe not fun, but certainly memorable story from my end. So, unlike Ryan, I did watch the animated series, and for my money, it's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen.
That's what I always hear from everybody.
Fantastic. It's very, very good. And doing a series, like a live action series versus a film, certainly makes a lot of sense. I think that was probably the right approach to this material. At any rate, I was very excited for the film because I did love the animated series. I also think the teaser trailer for The Last Airbender is
great.
one of my favorite teasers I've ever seen. It is phenomenal. It's very, very, very good. Especially because James Newton Howard, his score in the teaser. It's great.
Yeah.
So also what's fascinating about this film, so it comes out in 2010. In 2010, I was working at Home Depot at the time, and my shift was 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. So at that time, they didn't have Thursday screenings like they do now. You can go see Knock at the Cabin on Thursday night at 8 p.m., comfortably go to bed at a reasonable hour.
Sometimes 5 p.m.
Exactly.
We're going to start doing 8 a.m. screenings on Thursdays. You watch.
Yeah.
Back then was a true midnight screening. Those were the only quote unquote Thursday night showings you could go to was at
Jay,
midnight.
I went to so many of those.
No.
Yeah.
So
I know
where
it's
this is
coming.
going. I of
know,
course
this hurts.
had a midnight screening to see this, and I had
breaks
to
my
be at
heart.
work at 4 a.m. So as soon as I get out of the theater, I basically have to go home, get ready, and then drive to work. Is more or less what happened. And this film was so bad. I was fuming. The only way I made it through the day is because I was fuming. I was so mad.
Did you even sleep at all?
No, I didn't have time. That's
Not a
that's
nap in the
what was-
car. Hate nap.
No nap. No.
Jamie
And
committed cinematic seppuku. Is what he did. He sabotaged his next full day in the name
Yeah,
of seeing
it was-
Avatar: The Last. Excuse me.
I
just
was
The
so
Last
mad.
Airbender.
yeah,
You almost
was-
called it Avatar: The Way of the Water, didn't you?
I
Yeah.
almost called it Avatar: The Last Airbender, but there's no Avatar in the name.
No, there's no Avatar.
It's just the
But there
last
is
Airbender.
way.
It's
of
cleaner.
Water. Yeah.
There is a.
At any rate, the movie is not good. It is
garbage.
really bad.
Oh my
but
God.
as a fan of that lore, there are interesting elements of the film I like individually, such as the bending of the elements and the fight sequences separated from the narrative. Those can be compelling to watch, especially because there's not acting involved. Thankfully,
Yeah.
it's just action.
Noah Ringer, God bless you. Hope you're doing great. You're 26 years old now. One of the worst performances I've ever seen.
It's not great, but he's a true martial artist, so the action sequences with the character are more than serviceable. That's why he was cast. He was very good and all of that. But yeah, as a performance, it leaves a lot to be desired. But the redeeming qualities for me are the way the lore is depicted in isolation, and I truly think James Newton Howard's score is terrific. It is phenomenal. The film does not deserve that score. There are some tracks on that score that I think are among James Newton Howard's best work of his entire career. It's that good.
There are moments of tone that I think are at least interesting in that movie. I don't like the movie either. But yeah, there are a few moments where it does seem like Shyamalan's about to do something kind of cool, and he almost gets there, but they are so few and far between. But I agree about the music. I think the musical score here is quite good, honestly. Weirdly, in a movie that doesn't deserve it.
It's got good sound work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all I
some
got.
good technicals.
That's all I
I
got.
feel
about
like
it.
the action scenes in that movie to me feel like amusement park stage shows.
All right,
That's what
Martin
they feel like
Scorsese,
to me.
calm down.
Oh, I don't disagree. It's
No,
like
I mean,
I've
I'm
never
talking
seen
about
anything like.
quality of,
Yeah, no, I get you, Jay.
how uncinematic some of that stuff is. I just don't think
some-
M. Night's a great action director.
No, I don't think so either, and that's certainly the case with the next movie in this list as well.
Oh God, I forgot
All
about
right,
this one.
Speaking of 10-year anniversaries.
The glasses are coming off. All right.
For After Earth.
Hate this movie
Yeah,
so much. I had not seen it before this weekend. And
wait, you
let me
hadn't?
tell you. No, I had not seen it before.
Wow.
Okay. Good for you.
I'm so sorry.
I used to love myself. And now I hate myself. And so I do things like watch After Earth.
You watch After Earth, and then you drain out your sorrows with AI.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
you want to talk
yeah.
about the most cynical cinematic object that has ever existed. It's After Earth. You have M. Night Shyamalan at the lowest of low. You have some studio approach him and say, hey, we're doing a Will Smith movie. Would you like in on it? M. Night Shyamalan has no leverage whatsoever to make anything he wants at all anymore. So, of course, he's like, sure, I guess. I don't know. Gun for hire now? Is that what I am? Who knows? And what does Will Smith tell him to do? He says, I'm going to write this movie with you, and we are going to reverse engineer a film that will make my son a movie star. And what we're going to write is that I'm stuck in a ship so that I have to spend 3 days on set, and then you can use me in all the marketing. And that way, my son will be a superstar. And then what he didn't realize was that it was going to be absolute hot garbage. It is so bad. It looks awful. The plot is so dull. Jaden Smith couldn't act his way out of a cardboard box. It is just abysmal in every way. This is one of, I think right now, recency bias maybe, I don't know. This is one of my 20 least favorite movies ever made. I hate this movie. With every fiber of my being, I hate this movie.
No one responded to that. We're done.
I don't know what to say to that.
I don't have anything to say. I agree. I'll just simply say this is my least favorite Shyamalan film. I don't know if I go as I've never done the exercise to see if it's one of my least favorite movies of all time, because that's an exercise I never want to bother doing anyway. But yeah, in the grand scheme of M. Night Shyamalan, this is bottom of the barrel for me. I don't think there's anything about this movie I find redeeming, honestly.
Nope, not a darn thing. You're not going to hear me debate, like try to find it. Oh, there's this angle. No, this movie's terrible. This movie's bad. Like it's one of those movies where you watch and you go, yeah, I am surprised he did have the resurgence he had, because I'm surprised even somebody would allow him to finance his own movies after this.
To call this a career killer is almost an understatement.
This is you are already 6 feet under, and then this movie comes out. You are at the core of the earth underground after this movie. So the fact that he has even risen to having a conversation about this past weekend with Knock at the Cabin is remarkable, because this movie should have, like, how did Will Smith win an Oscar after, and not have any effects of this? I mean, clearly Jaden Smith was the one that got screwed over here, which is fine because we all got saved tons of more bad performances. But the fact that this was put by most people at the feet of M. Night Shyamalan, I think is it's not really his fault either. He's playing with a loaded deck.
Movie. This is a Will Smith.
Will Smith.
This is a Will Smith vehicle.
It is. Yeah.
And so that's why anytime Will Smith ever
produced by
whatever you think about Django Unchained, every time I hear Will Smith say about how he was going to try to make it his movie, I think, Django Unchained would have been so after earth that it probably would have killed Quentin Tarantino's career. So no, thank you, Will Smith.
It's the fatal flaw of Will Smith's career, and we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. But the reason that Will Smith is not going to be remembered as one of the greatest actors of all time is because he couldn't get out of his own way. He had to make every movie a Will Smith movie.
It feels very mechanical.
Meryl Streep had an era of her career where she did this that I thought was really detrimental to her career. The Rock is doing it now more than anyone ever has.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
To be fair to Will Smith, regardless of what you think of his films critically, though, this was the first failure economically in his career.
Sure.
So it's understandable why he would have that approach.
Yeah.
Well, JD, he did have I will push back a little bit there. He did have like Hancock wasn't his biggest success, but then he started having problems with like 7 pounds and all the awards movies he was starting to chase, and then there was this, and then he started right around that time was this, and then it started a very downward trajectory, which then was supposed to go up last year, and then we all know what happens, and we're not going to keep going on that on that train. But I do think that is the one thing you could defend about M. Night Shyamalan here, and it's not having to do with anything on screen, is the fact that when he walked in, it was never his project. And the fact that he got most of the blame for it is, again, another thing of like why I feel so bad for this man, because this industry has spit him up and chewed him out and all these different things throughout the entirety. Now, some of it is his fault. There's no question about it. But when you put labels and then when you put massive expectations mixed in then with unwinnable situations, it is absolutely a recipe for disaster. Nobody, even the greats like Scorsese and Spielberg, could not overcome something like After Earth. Like there's nobody could.
In fact, I remember for the longest time, he wasn't even a credited writer until recently. I thought when the movie first came out, he wasn't even a credited screenwriter, which kind of goes back to this topic we mentioned earlier, that maybe he was just a hired gun. This doesn't even really feel like an M. Night Shyamalan film at times.
No.
Like just tonally, visually.
It has no personality whatsoever.
Yeah, but even like with a movie like The Last Airbender, which I don't care for, I at least felt like Shyamalan was trying to do things in that movie that were his ideas.
I agree.
Which is why I weirdly want to give that film more credit than After Earth. But
certainly why I appreciate it more.
Yeah,
Last
exactly.
Airbender is so incompetently made. Oh
It is. I'm not saying it's competent at all, but if we're comparing it to one shitstorm after another, it's I'll give less shit. I'll give less shit to the one that actually has a little bit more personality to it.
There are at least 2, maybe 3 components to The Last Airbender that I don't think are terrible. There's nothing you can say about that with After Earth. Maybe even The Happening. It's why I think I appreciate that film of the 3, even though all 3 are terrible. But I will say this, as bad as that 3 film stretch is, in hindsight, I'm sure those years were difficult for him, but as a consumer of art and as a fan of his work on the whole, I'm grateful that it led him to where he is today.
I was just going to say.
Because without those 3 films, we don't get Knock at the Cabin. We don't get Old. We don't get Glass or Split. Yeah. And
we can hate them.
I'm grateful for it.
But I don't think it's fair to hope they never happened. I think to have them here is a necessity. And I think in a weird way, Shyamalan himself might look back on him and think, I'm actually thankful for this terrible time in my life because I learned what I could do better and differently from those experiences.
And now he's finding himself again.
Yeah.
And I like that.
And he's
I very much appreciate that.
He's a very different director than he was pre-happening, Airbender, really.
Well, there is a lot of, we talk about how bold he is now during this resurrection, if we want to call it that. There's also a level of cynicism as well. There's a nastiness to some of his movies, which
for sure.
Yeah, we talk about The Visit, for instance, which might be the meanest movie he's ever made in a way.
Which coming off After Earth and The Last Airbender,
well, see, that's
kind of
the
understandable.
Thing. It's like I've come to appreciate that nastiness as I've gotten older. I actually hated The Visit when I first saw it, but now I think I might have to give that movie some respect for actually being as diabolically comedic and harrowing all at the same time.
It's pretty good. I haven't seen that one until this weekend either.
Interesting. Yeah, there are effective scares in that one for sure.
I had given up on Shyamalan.
The whole hide and seek sequence underneath the house is really effective. But yeah, it's like it does tonally and emotionally kind of feel like a response to the worst time in his career. So I'm kind of glad that it happened because it led to really interesting things.
Well, it's also interesting too, the fact that when he does The Visit, he talked about recently that he refinanced his house. He put all of his money in. This is where the sort of putting all the chips in and proving something to himself. And I think also too, is he is a person that I think with Sixth Sense and the twists and all the world started creating the modern twist movies that we started getting. You know what I mean? We don't have movies, I think, like, you know, something like even Memento without the Sixth Sense, you know what I mean, coming out. Because, you know, we don't have The Prestige, you know, movies that, you know, like Nolan's sort of arc is built off of the back of
and
the
a lot of these bad
popularity.
examples.
I don't know about that.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I think those
lot of these-
popularities of those films and those getting financed, Jay, yeah, those are things that definitely, like, it's built into a marketplace where we need movies with twists and stuff like that.
There was
you know,
definitely
they're
an
not
influx
similar.
of bad horror movies, especially in the early 2000s, and they all seem to have the same twist ending.
Yep.
Like it was like, oh, it was the main character all along. Like remember that movie Hide and Seek with Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning? Like that's a great example.
Exactly.
There were so many of those for a while.
He's been influential in many genres across the board. And what's interesting is with The Visit, he's actually jumping into a genre that was not something that he created, but was sort of on the rise from, you know, obviously like Blair Witch that came out the same year as Sixth Sense, but then the Paranormal Activity sort of rise and everything. But it's kind of, hey, I'm the guy who I'm a good enough director to take this genre and bring something that elevates it and using the form in a different way that is
Careful,
not
Ryan,
being
using that word.
used. Well, you know,
haters after us.
I know what the haters and everything saying the word elevated is bad, but he does beyond
Just
just like what
we just claimed Shyamalan's making elevated horror.
he's to that sort of kind of film. Yes, he is, and I think that it's and it works mostly for him, and I think that it's also something we hark on with a lot of big directors when they make missteps or even when they make great films that we love. But we always say, man, I wish they would strip it down and kind of go back to their roots. Kind of just go back to making something smaller.
That's
go
what he
back to
did.
making,
But
you know,
this isn't his roots. This is so different than anything that he had ever made before.
It's a new debut film of sorts.
I think it's his roots, but more at a bare bones level.
Yeah, it's taking
what we saw before.
Yeah, it's not like, but I mean, like Jay, in terms of like going back to his roots, going back to just like simple, you know, horror film with a twist, focusing on the actors rather than the bombast, the spectacle, the rigmarole that can be provided when trying to top yourself. Just make a movie. Just worry about getting it from point A to point B to the end. That's it. And I think that that's what he does here, and it works really well. It's not like the best film that he's ever made, but it's one like, okay, good. You can do this, and sort of have the confidence within yourself to do it. So then you can propel yourself to maybe make something great again that I think he does, you know, in a couple films later.
It's effective. It's effective for sure. And I mean, most importantly, for the found footage element you're talking about, Ryan, it is inexpensive because that's what he needed at this point in his career. And
I have
yeah.
it's really interesting to see his characters behave differently in this part of his career than earlier.
The way they speak differently too. Like they speak in a very weird like syntax. It's so bizarre.
He's also way more willing to just have contrivances in his story, I think, a little bit, just because he wants to shoehorn in ways to show images that he wants to show. He has become such a more visually dynamic filmmaker, I think. I think he was a know classical visual genius in his early films, but now he is doing things that nobody else is doing with the camera, and I think he's shooting these found footage movies. I think he brings a lot of verve to this kind of film, which can be so flat, which can be so lifeless.
There is an energy to it, but you know, having two kids with different cameras and they're edited together in an interesting way, as if what we're seeing is their own post-production product. So again, it's a contrivance there, but it's interesting if you think about it in that way. I've liked this movie more as time has gone on. Like I said, I hated it when I first saw it, but a lot of that was because I was negatively responding to that nastiness that we talked about. I found the way it treated children in these situations with a more comedic kind of edge. I found it so off-putting, but I don't know. As I get older, I guess I become more of an asshole now because I kind of respect it a little bit more.
Shyamalan both.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, as we wind down this conversation, I do want to crystallize this because I do want to get to the next segment. So
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get to any final thoughts you have. Any other thoughts you guys might want to throw out there on Split, Glass, Old, and maybe what you think of the rise, the fall, and the resurrection, if you will. Any final thoughts you guys have?
Yeah, just Split, really interesting film. The fact that that's probably his most famous, now more infamous twist. And he used kind of the post-credit. He kind of
that was exciting when it happened.
I mean
will
the
say. That
I
got
mean
me.
kind of like, again, the post-credit scene is all the rays. So what does he do? Is he makes the one that kind of blew everyone's mind. I was at Fantastic Fest in Austin last year, and that movie premiered at Fantastic Fest, and that's where the buzz came from. And people are still talking about that moment to this day, and that's why people were like hoping that Knock at the Cabin was going to be one of the secret screenings, because they were like, man, when Split happened, that was like mind blowing, like holy hell. And then Glass came out, for some people, and I think that they're interesting films. I think Glass, like we said, fascinating meditation on the superhero genre, sort of something that he helped invented, but he didn't really champion all the way through. But he's kind of commenting on now and what it's been. It's a messy movie, but I think it's really interesting. Old rules. Old is like old freaking slaps. I love that movie. Like I think it was one of my underappreciated films that we did that year in 2019, or what was it, 2021, when it came out, and I had that on my list there, I believe. I just remember watching that movie and going, this movie is fascinating in the choices it's making, the dialogue and how it's being said, the camera. I think it's weirdly sentimental too. I like the stuff on the beach scene between Gail Garcia Bernal and Vicky Krieps. I think their performances are fantastic. And then the ending is preposterous. But it's one of those two where I just was like, I don't know how I when you sit there and you go, how
Shyamalan plays the director of the movie, Ryan.
Exactly. And when I'm sitting there, but I also, it's one of those where I sat there, I was like, I don't know how this movie was going to wrap up. So until I figure out a better way, sure.
It's like,
that's the ending.
Here's this wild movie about almost playfully done about the ramifications of aging so quickly that you start to sort of look at your own life and how that relates to your own family members and what you may have lost over time. And then it all of a sudden becomes an indictment on the healthcare industry.
Hell yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't like
Let's
that.
go.
I do really like that movie. Let me ask y'all this. I've kind of said my piece on Shyamalan. What's the best M. Night Shyamalan performance?
Signs. Signs.
Yeah, Signs. Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Signs is good.
I think he gives a genuinely good cameo performance in that movie.
I agree. Yeah.
And I don't mind The Village. I don't mind The Village because it's
more subtle.
It's more subtle.
It's more of a hidden performance.
I will say, Jay, his performance in Knock at the Cabin, his little cameo in there, is genuinely hilarious.
I actually think he's really funny and old.
I agree. I think that's one of his better ones. It's certainly
more
better
like
than Lady in the Water.
Like his role in Old was his role in Old was very much like reminded me of like Hitchcock. You know what I mean? Like that was very much Hitchcock, where it's like I'm gonna be behind the camera, twirling my mustache.
All of a sudden, it kind of reminded me of the infamous teaser trailer for Psycho.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it came off.
That's what it felt like, very much. And I kind of weirdly respect it. It's kind of, but it also too, he barely speaks in the film. It's kind of great.
And final thought. I was watching Signs with my wife, and we were watching it, and she was like, "Oh, is his wife dead?" And I was like, "Yeah, she is." And she was like, "Oh, I've seen this before. How does she die?" And then she was like, "Oh, I remember how she dies because of Scary Movie 3."
Yeah.
Exactly.
I believe that scene is involving Charlie Sheen, if I remember correctly.
And Denise Richards. Yeah.
Yes, Denise Richards. Yes.
All right. M. Night
Anyway.
Shyamalan, fascinating director. All right, let's get to some Q&A. Gentlemen, are you guys big coffee drinkers? You like to drink some coffee?
We're in our 30s. Of course we are.
Oh boy,
Guys.
I love coffee.
We are
Heard
caffeine addicts.
of
Caffeine
Brendan
addicts.
Fraser in Georgia the Jungle. Java, 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 Java,
Choppa, choppa,
Yeah.
choppa, 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 choppa.
I'm so tired, but I could use a good cup of coffee.
A good cup of coffee called coffee.
Oh, would you look at that?
It's good. So what I'm drinking here is the Holiday Blend, which is not for sale right now, but when it comes available, get it.
Oh, look at you sneaking ahead of the game.
It's very, very good. It's my favorite. But also, if you like your coffee to taste like sweet, delicious blueberries or strawberries, the Ethiopian Harar, oh my God, that is heaven in a cup. And that's what's great about Coffee Cult. They source only specialty grade Arabica coffee beans from over 50 countries around the world, inspecting each bean to get the highest grade possible. And as a result, the quality is unmatched. The other great thing is they roast to order. So let's say Ryan wants to order tomorrow and he needs his coffee. Well, he's going to order the Colombian because that's what he drinks. Okay. And it's going to show up. It's going to show up at his house in 2 days. And it's because they're roasting it tomorrow because that's when he ordered it. And then it shows up 2 days later. I mean, you can't beat that.
You're getting the freshest coffee. And for those of us that actually, care about our taste buds, we realize that coffee making is kind of an art. It is kind of an art. And we want to respect the art and give credit where credit is due. And speaking of giving credit where credit is due, with Coffee Cult, they only source coffee from farms that actually pay their workers, especially women workers there too. And it pays them fairly and equally, which is also a great incentive to choose Coffee Cult for your coffee drinking needs.
Now, I only have 2 questions here, and that is about these coffee beans. When they're getting graded, do they have like extra credit, or is it like a sort of like, do they have it's like an all around quiz? Do they get to like have their study notes out? Really, just kind of curious about the grade of the quality of this.
Did not
bean.
expect you to be the one.
And then when it is particularly roasted for me, is this like kind of gentle humor, or is this like really dark humor? Like, is it like a light roast, or is it a dark roast?
It's very vanilla. It's very vanilla.
The roast
okay,
dark?
well, that's nice.
Do you want it medium? Do you like your roast bitter?
See, I like my roast to not hurt my feelings, so I think I'm more of a medium roast myself.
Medium roast guy. Well, they have a delicious medium roast as well. You could definitely check out.
There you go. Sold.
A little more zesty, a little more cozy.
Yeah, and of course, most of their single origin coffees are a medium roast. So again, get the Harar. It's fantastic. Yeah. It tastes like blueberry muffins. It's the best. Yeah. So definitely go check it out. With our code, you get 15% off. That code is ISF. Use the code ISF at checkout
15.
And get 15% off.
Holy cow. Join the cult.
All right. So the first question I'm going to pull here is from Patreon. So if you want to sign up at Patreon, you will get first dibs on questions for the show. That's patreon.com/InSessionFilm. The first question here is from friend of the show, the great Mark Herney. And this is an interesting question because
it's a genuine question too, given the history of the show.
Yeah, it very much is appropriate to last week in this transition that we made. Because Mark asked, does JD sleep? No. And 2, how does JD keep up with family, movie watching, podcasting, editing, sports, social media, yada, yada, yada. So it's funny you asked that, Mark, because
it's actually pertinent to this new structure.
Yes, it is a big reason why we're doing it this way now. So I have, my wife is pregnant. We're expecting our second child.
Yeah.
So, and we've been trying for a while. She gets pregnant. I have a slight existential crisis, to which I immediately reach out to Brennan and Ryan and Jay. And I basically let them know, hey, look, things are going to have to change. We've been doing it this way for 10 years. And between, I think I mentioned this last week, Brendan, or maybe it was
we
at the
talked
beginning of our
about this a
close
little
review.
bit during
I
our
can't
close
remember.
review. Yeah.
Yeah. So from show prep, doing notes, seeing the film, doing notes, doing the show and editing, that whole process for every episode was between 15 and 20 hours just for the main show. And then, of course, I was editing Ryan and Jay for Extra Film. Then recently we started doing Women in Session. And I loved doing it, but it is a little overwhelming. And
A little?
Then you enter in the second child, a little, yeah, slightly overwhelming. So I basically stated like, hey, something's going to have to change once the new baby gets here. So either I will just be the editor of the show and you guys kind of take over doing the microphone stuff, or we're going to have to change how we do this. So we ended up combining the main show and Extra Film, obviously, and we're doing it this way with video to reduce editing time.
Yeah,
and
that's the irony there. You would think for those of you watching and listening that we have a video component to this that would add more work. It does not. It
makes things super simple.
Yeah,
yeah, and of course we've restructured the show as well to help with editing.
Yeah.
And you know, I joked with the guys in our group chat that I had so much free time last week after editing and releasing the show that I almost burst into tears because I was like, I have so much more time now. It's great.
So much more time for activities.
So much,
nice.
yeah, exactly.
Is this what boredom feels like? This is the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, it was pretty glorious. And so that's why we're doing the show now, because I needed that time. Because it was getting to be a little too much. So,
and we knew that with this being our 10-year anniversary, that we wanted to do something a little bit new and evolve. You know, when you hit 10 years old, you go through puberty. So this show needs to change and kind of evolve with that. And at the same time, too, JD, you had said that if we were to keep status quo, you would remain as a producer / editor role, and your voice would be more absent, and if not totally absent from the show going forward. And that's a voice we just did not want to lose, because what makes a great show is what we feel like is built on camaraderie and banter that I think we all of us have here, and we didn't want to lose that. So it's another reason why we're doing it this way now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, honestly, also too, to answer the question of all the things that he does, there was going to be a sacrifice, and it was going to be a battle to the death between JD's children, his wife, the hockey players, us, and we just decided to spare the blood and just make this this seemed a lot more easier than a lot of
my weapon of choice being the bass guitar.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
What I'm so excited about is this is going to give JD more free time to rewatch Miami Vice and find out.
I knew it.
There you go.
I knew it.
And then when he's done with that, he can watch Interstellar.
It's,
See, these are the moments that you have now, the time.
You know what, Ryan? Speaking of free time in Interstellar, if you and I want to get together and do like a live commentary podcast, as we
I think
watch
that'd
the
be
movie,
great.
I would totally be down.
Because every time, you know what's funny? It's like usually I'm the one around here that has like, and I'm not saying that I'm just hang on with me here because you're gonna think that I'm being mean here, but it's usually I'm the one with like, oh, the dumb logic in this movie kind of breaks apart, and you're like, and JD's been usually in the past like, oh, come on, that's not even that bad. Like, what are you talking about here? Like, no. Like, I remember
but the emotional stakes or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So it's weird that the shoe is on the other.
Problem with that movie.
It's
well,
not.
it's
No,
funny
it's
that
not.
you say that,
It's
Jay,
not.
because
It's great.
Drama.
That is it. It's the emotional stakes.
Oh, it's so
Falls off a cliff. Anyway, but yeah, I'd be willing to do that. With
Yeah,
you.
we'll do something when around Oppenheimer. We'll be talking about some Nolan stuff.
Yeah, we'll be doing Nolan.
That's actually a good idea. I suppose.
Yeah, actually, I'm building my bomb as well to go off at the same time at the premiere. So it's.
I'm doing a solo Tenet commentary.
Oh, wait! If you're doing one and I'm doing one backwards, isn't that a?
Oh yeah, you guys should do that.
Temporal
Watch it
movie?
backwards,
and then find a place to meet in the middle.
Find a
It's
place
like
to meet in the
inverted.
middle. How can we?
This
We gotta
sounds
figure out that technology.
amazing.
I love
We
that
have,
idea.
we have to do some math to find out the right timing for all of this.
Right?
You know?
You
Yeah.
want to watch it forwards or backwards?
Someone get Nolan.
It
on
don't
the phone. He
matter
might
because
know.
either way, it's good. It's good.
Okay, so this next question is from, again, friend of the show and also former co-founder Nate Parsons.
Yeah.
I believe this one is directed at you, Jay. What do you think of the new DC plan? Anything you're excited for?
All right,
Listen-
rate, review,
listen
and
to
subscribe. Click below.
Yeah,
Listen, to me.
As Steven Soderbergh once said, "Let them all talk."
exactly. Yeah.
If you're gonna get rid of my main man, Jason Momoa,
My man.
as
Gosh, here we
Aquaman,
go. Yeah.
then we're gonna throw hands. we're going
It's gonna
to
go down.
physically
Yes.
fight each other because that
Yeah.
is one of the best kind of franchise superhero movies ever made. And now you're doing what? You're getting in here with Gamma Dude, whatever, some nobody. I mean, yeah, I don't know. James Gunn is good. I liked his Suicide Squad movie. All right, it needed a reset. Here come the comments. The Zack Snyder universe. It was time to die. He was never
boy.
the right guy to,
We're getting
to build,
canceled
to
now.
construct that universe. He never was. He does not have the sensibilities required to create a universe like that. He is the
And this is the last
meathead
episode of the
philosopher
InSession
of our
Film
time,
Podcast.
and he tried to incorporate
Starting to play
those
taps in the background.
sensibilities into this franchise, and what it created was this complete mishmash. And now James Gunn is going to come in here, and what he has done is he has created one of the most heartfelt, best superhero franchises with Guardians of the Galaxy. Kind of bring those sensibilities into the fold. He appears to have a sincere love for the characters that he's making these movies for. Maybe it'll be good. I don't know. We're getting a Batman, the Batman too. That's all I care about.
Yeah, which is
part
an
two.
Elseworlds movie.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be
Yeah.
part of this new DC
Thank
Studios
God.
connectivity.
But they're also making other Batman movies at the same
It's
time.
like The Brave and the Bold, I think it's called. It's meant to be about the relationship between one of the specific Robins. I actually forget who it was.
You guys are going to be excited for the Batman Part 2, but be extremely disappointed in Part 3 when Joaquin Phoenix's Joker
Son of a bitch.
becomes the new
Son of
Joker.
a son. No,
That's what
it's
they're
Barry
gonna do.
Keoghan. No, but Barry Keoghan's already the
I know.
the
I'm just
Joker.
kidding.
No,
His face is going to morph
I was like,
Colin
don't
Farrell's
do that to me,
Johnny
JD.
Depp.
No, I think all honesty, this will be the other take that'll get us canceled. But this actually is a lot more promising than the future of Marvel for me, because it's something newer
Interesting.
and something different. And
we gotta
and,
talk
and
about Marvel. One of these
because I feel
No, we
like
don't.
Marvel
we
is
do.
like no, I feel like honestly, like, you know, you look at sort of Marvel and where they are, it feels like they by most audiences it's starting to wane a little bit. I feel like they could use a little bit of a redirection or a
It's going to change.
you know, and
We're getting
and
weird. Marvel's gonna get
I
very
understand
weird.
that, but weird doesn't always mean it's going to be the same amount of success
No,
and
Iger is
everything.
But it's gonna be
Iger's
different.
bringing back kind of the old mentality, which I think is smart because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is oversaturated in
Yeah,
the marketplace.
it's a lot, and I think with this, it clearly looks as, I mean, they have this planned out. Honestly, and all, for me personally, we know that a lot of these movies really, I'm the only great news about this for me is that they aren't going to do what a lot of the rumors and all this other stuff was talking about, was trying to take the Batman from Matt Reeves and sort of try to implement it in this or whatever. And I know they're going to do a full like reboot, restart sort of situation and go from there, incorporate almost like a new multiverse or a new thing where like some of the people carry over, but some don't, whatever. I'm curious about it. I mean, honestly, for me, the thing about this is I've genuinely want to see a Superman movie that's good. And I feel as if Man of Steel had all the potential and just did not work for me. And then for
the first
years,
half is pretty good.
Yeah,
the
and then
first
for
half of Man of Steel I
years-
kind of like.
years after that, we just never ever decided to go back to that. And I feel really bad for Henry Cavill, and I feel really bad for a lot of the fans who wanted to see
Henry Cavill taking some L's lately.
He really has, and I'm that was what was interesting to me. Obviously, like a Green Lantern movie kind of looks like, it can't be any worse than the one before, and but as long as Matt Reeves' vision is kind of kept in pat, and yes, I know there's another Joker movie, I could care less about that, but as long as that movie and its trajectory is left to Matt Reeves' devices, I'm totally fine with whatever the hell they want to do. But again, these aren't like the most interesting franchises to me. Like, the most interesting franchises in cinema right now have movies coming out this year, and that for me is like John Wick, and that's Mission Impossible, and even to a certain extent what will happen in the future with Dune. I'm much more interested in stuff like that.
Aquaman.
And,
Yeah, going back to DC, the Lost Kingdom, baby.
I mean, like, that's the thing about him too, is it's like they have to get rid of these Snyderverse, I guess, DC movies that they already have, and that Shazam movie looks bad. Like from the trailers alone, it just looks so bad. And then they're going to have to, at a certain point, it'll probably be this weekend at the Super Bowl, release footage for The Flash. And then that whole summer is just going to be a wild ride for them. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a little bumpy at first.
Miller's
but,
world.
Exactly. And so, I'm JD, I'm curious more than you, because I know you're the big superhero guy around here and everything, what you think about all this.
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to DC, I'm kind of where Jay was talking about, and they just needed a reboot. Yeah. The problem is they brought in Zack Snyder. Maybe he was the wrong guy for it. Maybe he was the right guy for it. I think the problem more than anything is that they were already 5 years behind Marvel, and they were
trying to do the same thing, and
they were trying to catch up way too fast, and that forced a ton of films and contrivances and storylines that just did not come together very well. And then you compound that with this really unfortunate event in Zack Snyder's life regarding one of his children, and you just can't foresee things like that happening, and that, it's heartbreaking, but from a DC marketing budget perspective, it made things all the more challenging, obviously. Yeah. So they needed to find themselves at a line where they can just cross over into the sand and start something completely new without having to compare themselves to Marvel. So they bring over one of the Marvel guys to do that, ironically, and James Gunn.
It makes me think, like, was he brought on to try and do what he did at Marvel, or because he knows the Marvel game and wants to do something at DC that is anything but the Marvel formula? And that's what I'm not sure about, which I mean, it's interesting to theorize about what his agenda might be.
Well, I mean, I like that. I do like... I'm sorry,
I was just going to say, I mean, knowing James Gunn, like James Gunn's films try to have this subversive quality to them, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. I don't think, if that's his mentality regarding the DC broadly speaking, I don't think he's going to regurgitate Marvel. That just doesn't seem very James Gunn to do.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to do that. And I think we're already seeing the fruit of that. And hey, look, we're not bringing back Henry Cavill. Mm-hmm. We're not bringing back Ben Affleck. We're not bringing back Gal Gadot. Like, we're keeping the problematic child of the Flash for some reason.
I think that Gal Gadot and I think they said that Gal Gadot and Ezra Miller and Momoa, they are open to allowing them to return to those characters, just not the films that they were going to do. I think that's you don't quote me on that.
I think it's not just that, but maybe even other characters. I know there's a lot of speculation that Jason Momoa will actually be playing Lobo or something like that.
Here's which I know question. And sorry, Brendan, you can finish.
No, that's all I had to say is that I know that Momoa has been it's a character I think he'd be itching to play. I think is what I heard.
My question with it is it the wrong play to put a creative at the head of an endeavor like this?
Honestly, I think is
a CEO first. He is like he is a facilitator. And he has a lot of ideas creatively, but he is not the creative force behind any of these films. And
James
I just
Gunn
wonder if that is the better way to do this.
It's a good question. I will say this though. Obviously, James Gunn knows the comics very well, and that helps. And he was over there long enough that I'm sure he was able to see how this was able to work from a business perspective, and he'll.
This
be
is
able
where
to
I think Peter Safran
incorporate
comes
that.
into play. Is that I think you have two creatives running things, where you have one that's more on the creative side and the other one more on the facilitation side of things. And I think that facilitator, I'm only speculating, I think maybe those facilitating hands will be more governed by Peter Safran, if that's my hypothesis there.
Yeah. And I think, Jay, the model for this isn't even Marvel. It's what's going on over at Lucasfilms with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau.
And everybody's super enthusiastic about everything going on in Star Wars.
Well, I mean, Andor was one of the more celebrated series this year. Whether
The
you
TV
like
stuff
it,
has been way more successful than a failure.
Yeah.
I mean, The Mandalorian is still one of the more popular shows. Like what I'm saying is that at least from Star Wars right now is very much the television shows. They aren't doing movies right now.
They don't.
And so therefore, they have given Filoni and Favreau complete control to spearhead those projects, have creatives behind it that fix those visions, and it has worked, and people have really loved those shows. So I think that this could work for that, but for a bigger scale. And if you have an actual plan, like it seems they've mapped out a plan with stories.
That's the big thing.
And have showrunners writing the stuff. He's not writing everything, but he's writing the things that he wants to do. You have somebody involved. I mean, a lot of what Kevin Feige learned from, if we're to be honest with this, he had Favreau there along for the ride very early on in that Marvel phase to sort of help them tool everything together. Then it was Joss Whedon with those
to
Avengers
create a
films.
narrative there.
And build that momentum, and then it branched out to even bigger returns that they could possibly imagine. Because when the first Avengers movie came out, we were all still kind of wondering if it was even going to work. Because the idea of having all those characters together, and then it's
so wild that Jon Favreau is like one of the most important cinematic figures of the 21st century.
He really is.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Pretty wild.
He
really is.
So interesting. And with regard to the DC slate, what James Gunn did announce, like, I don't know about you guys, it felt kind of like a partial announcement. Like, I feel like he still has some tricks up his sleeve that he's not revealing yet.
They're waiting on a bunch of stuff.
I think, there's probably bigger things that we're going to hear about, because what we heard about sounds really interesting, but it kind of felt like an incomplete announcement, more of like a palate cleanser. It felt like an appetizer, which I'm not against, but it's hard to make, I guess, judgments or even express excitement when I don't know what the full lineup's going to be yet. It felt it felt kind of all over the place, as if like, okay, here's what we're going to be doing, but it's not the full picture just yet. Just hold off for a bit.
They finally have a plan. Let's see if this actually works out, because the DCEU was a hodgepodge of what the hell are we doing? And now never could decide it. Now they actually have somebody, two people sitting in a room trying to figure this out, playing, putting all the strings together to try to create something. Why not give them a shot? And yes, a creative and then a CEO behind it, I think it could totally work, because you're then at that point making it about story rather than about the commercialization, the profits and everything. It's less machine work, I think, and more genuine at that part. And that's a little bit more optimistic, and it falls in line with usually how Warner Brothers operates. They have always been a director forward.
I hope they maintain that mentality.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Bad.
I agree.
As bad as some of those DC movies were, and they were bad.
Yeah,
they were a person's vision.
Yeah,
they were. I respect that, I guess.
All right, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about as time goes on. We have a few other questions, but we're getting low on time, so we'll save them for next week. So we'll go ahead and wind things down here. But just a reminder, next week on the show, we're of course going to be talking about Steven Soderbergh. because Magic Mike's Last Dance comes out. So we'll have something Soderbergh related.
Ryan and I haven't really spoken about Soderbergh before.
Yeah,
we've never talked about Steven Soderbergh. Close off or on, it's kind of optional.
32 Soderbergh movies last year. That definitely didn't happen.
That definitely did not happen. So we're going to have to talk about Soderbergh. So we'll talk about that. We'll have a review of Magic Mike's Last Dance as well. I noted at the beginning of the show, we'll have a review of Knock at the Cabin, which should be up by the time this goes live. So go and check that out. Be sure to check out our latest Women in Session podcast, where our lovely panel, they talked about the great Amy Adams. It was a lot of fun, so go and check that out. They'll have part 2 coming out this week, talking more Amy Adams. Of course, be sure to follow us on social media. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Shopify, Spotify, that is. Of course, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Go and check us out there. And we'll see you guys next week on the InSession Film Podcast. Go see Knock at the Cabin. It's good.
I feel like picking up my bass.
Go Chiefs.